Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Prabhupada Satirtha Sri Maharaj Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Charges Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Prabhupada Satirtha Sri Maharaj Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananti Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namachar Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shami Kun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Srimati Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Srimati Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaura Premananda Haribo. All glorious assembled devotees. All glorious assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories Sisi Guru Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I would just like to apologize because I'm probably going to be sneezing and coughing. And I don't have COVID, but I do get allergies, and I'm having a very horrific day today. So please excuse me. So, reading for Srimad Bhagavatam. We're on text 46, 210, 46. I've got 47. Okay, Parimanam. Parimanam cha kalasya kalpa lakshana vigraham yata purastad vyakyasye padmam kalpam ato srinu parimanam cha kalasya kalpalakshana vigraham yata purastad vyakyasye padmam kalpam ato srinu parimanam chakalasya kalpalakshana vigraham yata purastad vyakyasye padmam kalpam ato srinu parimanam chakalasya kalpalakshana vigraham yata purastad vyakyasye padmam kalpam ato srinu Mataji's. Parimanam Chakanasya. Parimanam, measurement. Cha, also. Kalasya, of time. Kalpa, a day of Brahma. Lakshana, symptoms. Vigraham, form. Yata, as much as. Purastat, hereafter. Vyakyasye, shall be explained. Padmam, by the name Padma. Kalpam, the duration of a day. Ato, thus. Srinu, just here. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O King, I shall in due course explain the measurement of time in its gross and subtle features with the specific symptoms of each. But for the present, let me explain unto you the Padma Kalpa. Purport. The present duration of a kalpa of Brahma is called the Varaha Kalpa or Svavasa Kalpa because the incarnation of the Lord as Varaha took place during the creation of Brahma, who was born on the lotus coming out of the abdomen of Vishnu. Therefore, this Varaha Kalpa is also called Padma Kalpa, and this is testified by acharyas like Jiva Goswami, as well as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in pursuance of the first commentator, Swami Sridhar. So there is no contradiction between the Varaha and the Padma Kalpa of Brahma. So I'll probably chant a few verses today, so we'll see how much time we have, but I'll at least chant a couple. But I don't have any questions or answers on this particular point. I think we really heard a lot from Srila Prabhupada in the previous couple of verses in his purports about this particular situation. So I have nothing to say or add on that, so we'll continue with the next verse. Text 48. I'll just chant. Shonaka uvacha yad aha na bhavam suta kshata bhagavatotma bhagavatotama chachara tirtani bhushvas. Translation. Sonak Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidura. For Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. Purport. The rishis headed by Shonaka were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. So yes, Om Jnana Timirandasha Gananjana Shalaka Chakshumi Tamjena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, maybe we can speak a few words about Vidura. Of course, just a little louder. Or, how's that? Okay. So, we can say a few words about Vidura. We'll be hearing a lot about him in the next Bhagavatam. We'll be in Canto 3, probably within the next day or so. And something about Vidura, he was a great personality. He was born of a Sudrani, a worker in the Pandava household. He was originally Yamaraj, I believe, who got cursed to become a Sudra. So in that way he took birth in a Sudrani, and he was called Vidura. And he was a very renowned person, very astute in politics, in transcendental knowledge, and he gave a lot of input and instruction and direction to the Pandava family. As things became more and more hostile between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, Vidura tried to give some good instruction to Duryodhana, and Duryodhana became very upset and didn't like it, so he completely rebuked Vidura. And because Vidura felt rebuked, he became disgusted with all these political issues, household affairs, and he decided that he'd immediately go to the forest and go on parikama. His intent was to actually come in contact with Uddhava. This is who he wanted to converse with, Krishna Katha. And he did meet Uddhava in the forest, but Uddhava was younger than Vidura. Vidura at this time was elderly. And so Uddhava suggested that Vidura go to Maitreya Rishi, who was older, out of etiquette. So although Vidura wanted Uddhava, he ended up with Maitreya. And of course, we'll be reading about that in the third canto Bhagavatam, about the Krishna Katha that they were speaking. Very beautiful part of the Bhagavatam. So, Prabhupada also said, I believe in the purport, that not only was the reason of Vidura because of the family squabble, but mostly he wanted to go to the forest to discuss Krishna Katha. That was his real major desire and feeling. So he left immediately. And he wanted to hear everything from Maitreya Rishi that was in relationship to Krishna Katha. And Prabhupada gives an example that fire itself is never satisfied in any amount of consumption of firewood that's put in the fire. So Prabhupada says that, so for a pure devotee of the Lord, he can never hear enough about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is something that we'll see in the pastime of Vidura and Maitreya. In this context, there's that verse in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Maschita matkata prana bodhayantam parasparam katayasnasamam nicham tushanti charamanti cha. This verse says that the thoughts of my pure devotees always dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to me, in service to me. And they derive great satisfaction and bliss in enlightening one another about me, especially conversing about me, meaning Krishna. So this is the position, and we'll hear about that more and more between Vidura and Maitreya Rishi. Also, something that was kind of interesting that Prabhupada spoke about in a purport that I was reading yesterday, if I can remember it. But he was talking about, he quoted Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, equating to devotional service like sowing the seed within the heart. And he says that the sown, or S-O-W-N, the sown is done by the chanting, hearing and chanting, Krishna Katha. And he says that there are so many living entities, but if one living entity or a few living entities get an opportunity to take up devotional service, it's a very rare situation, a rare position to have. And then Papa goes further to say that this seed is sown in the heart by the process of Krishna Katha, hearing and chanting. And as the hearing and chanting becomes more pure, as the devotee is chanting, and it becomes more and more pure, it fructifies. The seed in the heart fructifies. And then this fructification is that there's a plant. It's just an analogy. And from that plant grows from this hearing and chanting process. And as it grows, it goes beyond the material covering of this universe. And then the hearing and chanting continues. As it grows, then it goes to the Brahma Jyotir in the spiritual world, and it penetrates that. And then the hearing and chanting is still going on. And then eventually this plant goes all the way up to Krishna Loka. Yes, it goes all the way up. And the result of this hearing and chanting is that tree fructifies into a lot of fruits and flowers which represent love of God. And something that Prabhupada said that was really beautiful was that the pure devotees, the self-realized souls, they take continual pleasure in hearing about transcendental literatures and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada made this really nice little quote. He said that it's just like when a young boy and a young girl derive pleasure in association with each other. And I thought that was so, although it's a mundane example, it actually shows a lot of emotion in terms of like a young boy and young girl. When they meet, there's so much pleasure from that association. If you sometimes go out and you see a young boy and young girl, and you see they're talking and having fun and just continuously in ecstasy with each other. So I thought that was a beautiful way to describe how the pure devotees of the Lord, when they get involved in Krishna Katha, Prabhupada equates it like that it's completely ecstatic, it's ever increasing, and they are hankering and look forward to it more and more and more and more. And this is how we grow this seed of devotional service in the heart. And Vidura, he exhibited that, wanting to have the association of Maitreya Rishi, that the more they spoke, the more that he heard and spoke about Krishna Katha, the more ecstasy was developed from this relationship of the association of a devotee. There's another verse in the Bhagavatam, which I love very much. It also says, Sushushro Sharadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Seva Vipa Punya Tirtani Sevanat. This verse describes that if we serve those devotees who are freed from all vice, and this is essential, one must be freed from all vice. If we serve such a devotee, that's great service. And from that great service to that person who's freed from all vice, one becomes absorbed and wants to, and develops an affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. It's created. So we can see that the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, there's two of them. And we can see that we're given the opportunity to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the more that we serve the Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavat, if we serve them, we become more and more purified, more and more ecstatic, and want to hear more and more. And this is the position of devotees who make more and more advancement. They become more and more absorbed in the desire to hear about the pastimes of Krishna. And how rare that is. How rare it is that you can see we're in this temple here and there's so few of us here compared to what's outside. And even for what that matter, who's across the street. And they don't come across this side. They stay over that side. So you can see how rare that is. That it can be right at your, doorstep. It can be right in front of you. But it's a rare soul who develops that desire to want to hear and to associate and develop love for Krishna. Very rare commodity. So this is why Vidura is so exceptionally beautiful. And of course, like great souls like Uddhava, Maitreya Rishi, these great souls, they derive great satisfaction and bliss in enlightening one another about the pastimes of the Lord. And this is the whole format of the Krishna conscious movement. Our whole position is that we should be developing this type of understanding, this realization, how important it is to speak more and more about Krishna Katha with each other and encourage each other. And from that, we develop this seed of devotional service in the heart. And eventually it goes up to Goloka Vrindavan. And there the fruits of love of Godhead are manifest. And that is real. That's not a hearsay. It's a real reality that we see happens. Even in the Bhagavatam, there's stories like, for instance, Narada Muni. Narada Muni was also born in a Sudra family, from a Sudrani. His mother would serve the great sages and saints and munis that would come. During the rainy season, they would camp out for 3 or 4 or 5 months. And she served them, cooked for them. And Narada Muni, he would serve them also. And he would hear their Krishna Katha. And from that association, that service and that association, Narada Muni is the greatest of devotees, although he was born in a very so-called low-class situation. So what about us? If that can happen just by association and by hearing, this is the power of it. So the more we force ourselves even to hear, it's purifying. Sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes we have to really force ourselves to come across the street and to see Krishna. It happens like that. We have to, because we're so conditioned and fallen. So the benefit is there, though. That benefit is that if we force ourselves, if we take good association, then we can begin to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. And this seed of devotional service, it fructifies, it grows. It grows and grows and grows. And as we become more and more pure in our execution of our hearing and chanting, then it goes directly to Goloka Vrindavan. And that is really the importance of what we're doing here. That's exactly what it is. So, anyway, if I ramble on, let me know. I'm not in the best of situations right now. But we'll go to the next verse. We'll just might as well do that verse too. Text 49 and 50. Katu kosha ravestasya samvado dyatma samsrita yadvasa bhagavams tasmai prishtas tatvam uvachaha bruhi nastad idam somya vidurasya vichestitam bandhu tyaga nimittam cha yataiva gatavan punaha. Okay, translation. Sonika Rishi said, "Let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members and why he again came home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage." Yes, purport. Sri Sutta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world, but it appears that the rishis headed by Shonika were more inclined to hear of transcendental subjects which are on a higher level than the physical. There are two classes of men, namely those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others on the higher level who are interested more in transcendental knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist, by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. In the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they are acting, and they see wonders in those physical glamours. Sometimes, due to physical glamours, they forget the glories of the Lord. They should know, definitely, that physical activities and their wonders are all initiated by the Lord. So it's nice how Prabhupada says in his purport that the Srimad Bhagavatam is actually great for the materialist and the transcendentalist. We chant regular Shinvatam Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hriyanta Stohi Abhadrani Vidunoti Satam Surit Satam. Yes, this verse in the Bhagavatam, it describes very nicely that Krishna, who's the super soul, Paramatma, in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, he cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed an urge to hear the messages of Vasudeva, which in themselves are virtuous when properly heard and chanted. So this is the potency of hearing the Bhagavatam, that it cleanses the heart. But the devotee has to be truthful. This is an important prerequisite. So in the heart of the truthful devotee, Krishna cleanses the desire for material enjoyment. And we see that the Bhagavatam, if we hear constantly, we see there's pastimes of the Supreme Lord with his devotees. And as we were saying, there's two. There's the book Bhagavat, and the book Bhagavat is very important because it's full of information about the Supreme Lord and his devotees. And the person Bhagavat is also very important because the person that's a person Bhagavat, he actually lives his life according to the book Bhagavat, as we described about Narada Muni, and how Narada Muni, although he was not a very highly born person, but because he heard the sages speaking from the book Bhagavat, and they were persons Bhagavat, he became purified and became a pure devotee of the Lord. And actually he was one of the greatest of devotees. So the taste for hearing and chanting the holy sound is done through the medium of service to the pure devotee of the Lord. This is the process of Krishna consciousness. Nasta praishu abhidreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloka Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering of service to the pure devotee of the Lord, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed to nil. Just by hearing the Bhagavatam and serving the pure devotee, this is the result. And we see that Narada Muni is a great example of that. And we ourselves are examples of that, because not so long ago in our life, we were very much involved in materialistic activities, but by the association of the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, we became purified. And that purification is such that we become very much interested in hearing the topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada said this is the remedy for eliminating, that's the word, eliminating all the inauspicious things within the heart. And we have to take it very seriously in terms of our advancement in Krishna consciousness and moving forward. And I think that this pastime with Vidura and Maitreya will depict that particular position and how we all need to be very aware of what Prabhupada gave us in terms of himself, in his instruction, in his words, and then of course himself personally when he was here present, and then of course the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these things, those two are important in order to eliminate all these material desires that we have within the heart, and how much we are so attracted to this material energy, this material world. We see that it's so difficult to overcome the modes of material nature. Almost it's an everyday battle, but basically it can be overcome by just hearing and chanting. All right, we'll read a little bit more, finish up the purport. The rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet, not by a blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind that physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely, with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. If that is the real fact, how can we say that the real rose has taken its shape without intelligence behind the beauty? This sort of conclusion is due to a poor fund of knowledge. One must know from the above description of creation and annihilation that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of the omnipresence of the Supreme Lord. Persons still more foolish than the gross materialists, however, claim to be transcendentalists and claim to have such supreme all-pervading consciousness, but offer no proof. Such foolish persons cannot know what is going on behind the next wall, yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic, all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them also, hearing of excuse me. For them also, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is a great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming supreme consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisharanya, however, were above the gross materialists and the false transcendentalists, and they were always anxious to know the real truth in transcendental matters as discussed by authorities. Okay, I guess we can stop there. Anybody have any questions, I guess? We have a couple of minutes. Or comments? Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. I have one question. Like, generally, it's. I hope it's the right understanding that the Vedic knowledge, it's not given to like people born in the lower castes.
Yeah.
So you mentioned like Vidura was born
Yes.
through a Shudrani. So how is it Vidura received such knowledge?
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, with the Vidura, of course, it was Yamaraj. He got cursed. Now, with Narada Muni, it was nothing like that. He was just born in that particular situation. But your question is, how does that happen?
Yeah, because generally it's like given to Kshatriyas and
Yeah.
Brahmanas and the Vaishyas. So usually the Shudras, they are not given
Yeah.
Vedic knowledge. So
Well, I think that's just by the association. Just like Narada Muni, he was born in that circumstance, but his association was with most elevated rishis, munis, and yogis. And so by that association, he was able to understand and develop his Krishna consciousness. So again, I think that what we're saying here is that there's two types of Bhagavats. There's a Srimad Bhagavatam, and then there's the person. And the person, Bhagavat, he lives according to the book Bhagavatam. It's because he lives like that. If you come in association with that kind of individual, if one is sincere, of course that's a very important point. He has to be very sincere. And that person has to actually be truthful. What's that? Srinvatan Svakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. That individual has to be very truthful. And then by that truthfulness, it cleanses the heart for the desire for material enjoyment. And so that's the very important aspect. So no matter which level or you're coming from, by that association, one can be developed into a pure devotee of the Lord. And of course, that is also the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But according to these particular pastimes that we're reading here, it was due to association. And for us in Krishna consciousness, association is extremely important and very beneficial. Unless someone else has something they would like to add to that? Yes, Maharaj.
I don't like competition. So all I wanted to mention is that I was overhearing a conversation between a new devotee and a devotee who's been around for a while. And the new devotee asked the older devotee, what is the difference between a materialist and a transcendentalist? Because you keep using these two words, and I don't exactly know what you mean when you differentiate one from the other. And what is the benefit of one being a transcendentalist, and what is the benefit of it? So if you want to answer that, please take it, or if you're tired now, I'll be glad to step in.
Yeah, Haribol.
You want to take it?
No.
Okay, so basically a person who is a materialist is a person who's interested in obtaining things from the world or even from God for himself. In other words, he is the exclusive property or object of his conversation, his thinking, his feeling, and his willing. Whereas a transcendentalist is the very opposite. Krishna is the focus or the object of his conversation, of his love. In other words, he's a person who has surrendered to Krishna. He's given his all to Krishna. He wants Krishna to be pleased. He wants pleasure for Krishna. He doesn't want to hear anything against Krishna. This is the main point. Krishna is my all in all, and don't tell me anything else. That's a transcendentalist to the max. And a materialist is that the pleasures of the world is the all in all, and don't tell me anything else. So that's basically, it's a very simple answer, but actually the distance between the two is infinite.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. So
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to share my appreciation of a couple sentences in that last purport, where Prabhupada is saying that persons still more foolish than the gross materialist, however, claim to be transcendentalist and claim to have such supreme, all-pervading consciousness, but offer no proof. So I think Prabhupada is like he's smashing like sentimentalism here. Like we meet people sometimes while out on book distribution or whatever that, they took some like psychedelic drugs and they had some so-called mystical experience,
Yeah.
and then they think they're like the supreme consciousness.
Yeah.
But then you just ask them, well, show me some proof. How are you the supreme consciousness? And Prabhupada says here they don't even know what's going on behind the next wall.
Yeah.
What to speak of being the supreme cosmic consciousness.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. And I just wanted to add one other thing is I appreciated how you were describing how the Bhakti Lata Bij, by being watered by the hearing and chanting process, grows into a large plant, goes to Goloka Vrindavan. And I was hearing a seminar from my godbrother Radhesham Prabhu. He's like considered a learned scholar in the Shastra in Pune. And he gave a seminar in Harinam Chintamani by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and he was explaining that Bhakti Lata Bij grows into a plant, fructifies fruit of love of God, like you were explaining. But then he was saying that according to Harinam Chintamani, if one does not avoid nam aparad or offenses to the holy names, that instead of watering the Bhakti Lata Bij while you're chanting, you're actually watering the weeds.
Right.
So that's if you're performing nam aparad. So it can actually be a reverse effect. And he was explaining how this is why sometimes you'll see devotees who have been around for a long time, they all of a sudden, they leave or kind of have problems with sense gratification, or even you can observe within yourself if new material desires pop up, it might be due to you watering the weed instead of watering the Bhakti Lata Bij. And then he quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a purport where Prabhupada quotes Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur about what happens when one performs nam aparad and waters the weed, and he gives a long list of things. Yeah. Says like desire for name, fame, adoration, desire for enjoyment with the opposite sex, just all these material desires that pop up from nam aparad. So it's pretty important to try to at least chant Nama Bas at least.
Yeah. It's very good. Thank you. Yeah. That was good. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, thank you.